concerned people. Basically goes to the heart of it. Trying to keep, and often, elected officials, but it could be a leader, it could be anybody, honest. I mean, that's really comes to the heart of it. It's filling a void where other media isn't, and I can tell you, as working in the professional journalism side, that quite in the last couple of years, quite a few media, the media industry in general has consolidated quite a bit. They're cutting staff, and coincidentally, out of all the staff that they're cutting first is the investigative unit side. So they want to keep the fluffy. So one of the reasons you see all the fluffy news all the time and like whatever the Kim Kardashians of the world do it. Well, it's because people actually click on that stuff, and so they get rid of the investigative journalism side. You're not seeing as many investigative journalism pieces because our industry, my industry, is consolidated. But it's also where entire stories aren't being told. How many times have you picked up a newspaper or turned on the TV and tuned into the radio and heard a story and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's all fun and good, but there's quite a few other unanswered questions going on. And this is the beauty of citizen journalists. You can go out and fill in the rest of the story. Because to be honest with you, professional journalists have so much time, and to be honest with you again, we tend to work more than 80 hours in 2 weeks just to cover that. So if we're already strapped, and there's way more to the story, it would be great for citizens to actually be able to chime in and fill in where professional media isn't. Now the Franklin Center, as Chris said, we are a 501c3 organization based in Alexandria, Virginia. That is where I work out of. We have a professional journalism side, which is the watchdog.org side, but we also have our Citizen Watchdog program, which we're here today, with the Watchdog Wire. We have writers in almost every state in the union, whether that be professional or citizen. So that's a pretty cool fact for you. But the Watchdog Wire is really what we're concerned about here. We're in 13 different states, and what that means is we have 13 different state bureaus. So we have actual editors in different states, but then we also have a national page. So if we're not in, which currently we're not in Massachusetts, but so if you were to sign up with us and write for us, you would actually, your work would be placed on the national page. We're made up of, on the Watchdog Wire side, entirely of citizen journalists, which include bloggers. Are there any bloggers out there? Okay, mainly at this table. A couple out there, good deal. And just concerned citizens, people who want to tell the rest of the story, people who care about their local issues and care about the future. And our work is actually, on the citizen side, been picked up by sites like the Drudge Report. We've now had 2 Drudge hits from citizen journalists. Radio shows across the country, various blogs, and other large news outlets. Our work does get cited, so as you can see, with names like the Drudge Report, this is a citizen being picked up by the Drudge Report. It's not a major news outlet being picked up. So I feel like that's just kind of some of the cool things that we do. But we allow our citizens to cover issues that matter to them, as Chris kind of mentioned. You know, each city is different. Each school district is different. Everybody has different needs. And the one cool part about what we do is we allow our citizens to really tell the story. It might be some excess regulation. It might be a local city government trying to raise an excise tax that's unconstitutional, which I actually have an example a little later on. Whatever the issue, we allow you to be the storyteller. And what we do and more specifically what I do, is we help to develop, assist, and provide direction when needed to our citizen journalists. Now, obviously, a lot of people aren't going to come in with journalism backgrounds. However, some of our writers do actually come in with journalism backgrounds at some point. But as Chris asked, and quite a few hands went up, letters to the editor. I mean, blogs. These are all great things. So you already have a little bit of history and experience with this, but we can really help develop. We really bring out a story. You can contact us, people like me, and say, listen, you know, I went to this school board meeting and this guy said something absolutely crazy. Well, what do I do with it? Well, then I'll go, well, you know, give me a little bit of history. You know, tell me a little bit more about, you know, what he said. And then I'll be like, okay, here's kind of the thing that stands out the most to me. Here's what we should start with. Let's find here. And then you kind of go into, you know, has he ever said anything like this before? You know, where are some documents that we can get a hold of? You know, things like that. And then over the course of time, we can put together a good quality product and a good quality article, and we'll put it up on our page. So that's kind of what we will help you with whatever need you have. Maybe it's, I don't know what to name the title, because to be honest with you, writing is the easy part, and to be honest, the title's the hardest thing to actually get a good title, something catchy. Maybe it's something as small as that, but we're here to help you all the way. One of the cool things that we do is we provide Google Group emails. That's you sign up on our page, which I'll show you how to do in a little bit. But then your email gets entered into our system, and sometimes, you know, even on the professional side, a lot of times there's writer's block. You know, I don't know what stories to cover. But then we send out, usually once or twice a week, different stories that are happening across the country. To give you an idea, you know, maybe something like that's going on in my area. You know, pensions are a big problem everywhere. How is my pension system looking in my area? You know, just things like that we'll send out story ideas through. But the big thing is we do not endorse any political issue or party, and that's kind of a very key distinction. Being a 501c3, we cannot actually go out and put our full weight behind anybody. We're just there to tell the story. Now, there are very key distinctions of things you can do. Sometimes our writers do have a tendency to, you know, get a little close to the edge and or cross the edge, but we tend to work with it. We kind of massage it. Instead of "you should go out and vote," you can simply rephrase "voting is November 2nd" or something like that. I mean, just telling, you know, just give it a little massage. That's just kind of some of the things that, you know, if we see something that's kind of in the gray area, we'll kind of work with you on it and develop your writing skills as well. Okay. Beyond the World War I propaganda, don't let that scare you. We provide you with a medium to really get your story out there. And that's kind of big, because so often people feel frustrated. I mean, hence the Tea Party. People just got frustrated, pent up anger. What can I do? You know, and no one's listening to me. This is a great way. We have quite a bit of web traffic. I can't tell you the exact numbers off the top of my head. But it's actually pretty impressive. And if ever you want to actually feel like no one's covering the story, I don't know why, no one's listening, this is the perfect way to go about it, because here you can even get national attention on our national page, of course, writing out of Massachusetts. And we offer things like tip sheets, resource guides, and story direction, as I said, when needed. So I'm going to go a little bit off of this PowerPoint here. Now, signing up to become a contributor is pretty easy. This is our watchdog.com website. Right here on the front page, if you notice, right here, you can actually sign up. Yeah, sorry. Right there. You can also sign up for Watchdog Wire updates. But it's right at the top of our page. It's a simple form, just like this, that you fill out. That'll come to us. That'll let us know that you're interested. And we'll put you into our system. We'll give you a welcome email to let you know that, hey, we got your information. And then we'll start. You'll get signed up for the Google Group emails and everything like that. If you're here not from Massachusetts, and you were to happen to be in one of the states where we have a bureau, the editor of that state, which is also a citizen, which is really cool, citizens editing other citizens, they would usually contact you and say, okay, you know, bring you up to the loop, what can we do for you? And something that's really cool, and you know, all this may sound scary, okay, I'm going to be expected to keep producing all these stories. You produce stories at the rate that you want. If you're super busy, which we understand people are, you can produce one story a month, maybe once a week. Maybe if you have a lot of time on your hands and really are really passionate about something, about a single issue or maybe multiple issues, you can go to town. We allow you to tell the stories. So this is how to sign up. I mentioned before tip sheets. Now, obviously, being a citizen journalist, I mean, you might not have any experience at all writing, or maybe it's been a long time since you have written something. We offer on our website tip sheets, whether they be certain issues. Government documents are easier than they sound. You know, just requesting information, as I said before, you know, most of the time FOIA documents or public records documents, as they're referred to here, how to get a hold of them. All this information, all this public information is out there, and it's yours to get. but you just have to know how to do it. And these are some of the types of things that we really help you get to. Now also, obviously this is a rather big topic right now, but Obamacare. Obviously there's just, some of these issues are so broad and so massive that there's just so many moving parts. We actually also put together tip sheets on how to navigate that, how to find information, what topics to look for in your state, things like that. For instance, here we have different numbers that you can go to. What's the difference between a single, like we hear quite a bit, well, you know, Obamacare, we had 1+ million page views. Okay, well what does that even mean? Does that mean that doesn't mean that people are signing up per se, that just means people visited your website. So we have different numbers here and things like that. What documents you should go out and get. State legislation and regulations, where to look that up. Go look on social media. See what your politicians or, I guess, regulators are saying on social media. Advertising and outreach campaigns. So we have all these different types of tip sheets here for you. And let's see here. There's that guy. All right, and I think I just did that. So, being a citizen journalist, I mean, it's as easy as going to a town hall event, a city council or school board meeting, as we already said. It's writing a blog or on a pressing issue that you really care about. How many people have a cell phone in general? How about a smartphone? Okay. See, my mom, well, she doesn't have a smartphone. She likes to say she has a dumb phone. But even on a lot of those older phones, they still have the capability to take a picture. Or there are some functions that allow you to record audio. Sometimes it's as easy as just taking out your phone and going click and recording a single, maybe it's a leader, elected official, just somebody, a newsmaker, somebody saying something. I mean, that's as easy as it gets to become a citizen watchdog.
Disclaimer interruption is make sure you know the local laws. We're not legal authorities, so we don't know what the recording or videotaping, whether Massachusetts is a two-party consent.
It's a two-party consent, but not in public meetings. You're not going to get
right.
Just it's two-party consent, but not in public meetings. If your camera's out and visible,
yep.
He may. Yeah, but there's a Massachusetts State Supreme Court decision that was passed, I think, in 2011, that anything can be filmed that is in public view. So you can see we're all here in public view. On film, we're all in public view.
Well, this is a private building, so
if you're in public view, if there's something personal though, like say I'm videotaping on the interview with you, I have to ask, or maybe even sign. But if it's in public view, a public event is going on, something is happening in front of your face, Supreme Court decision in 2011, public view.
Right.
Yeah. But don't be a spy. We don't need to be a spy. We don't need a gotcha. Unless if you're uncovering, well, Watergate by comparison is nothing. Watergate is the small potatoes. But if you're uncovering something huge, then contact somebody for advice. But no story is worth being a spy and opening up yourself to a drama. So we don't need spy cameras. There's so much out there.
And there's some really famous examples of citizen journalism. For instance, the Osama bin Laden raid. It was not the mainstream media, it was not the big media outlets around the world who first reported the Osama bin Laden raid. Coincidentally, it was a neighbor on Twitter who, coincidentally, he's like, wait a minute, there's a lot of helicopter activity across the street, something weird's going on. Then all of a sudden, I hear a lot of bangs going on, like gunshots and everything like that. He told the story on social media. He was the first one to break the news before anybody else around the world had even heard about it. The Green Revolution in Iran, well, we were all in this country really getting frustrated, or at least a decent portion of it, we're getting frustrated with the beginnings of the Obamacare debate in 2009. The Green Revolution in Iran actually was going on Facebook and social media, on Twitter. The state, they were holding a massive presidential election for Ahmadinejad, and he was in trouble. So the state actually said, nope, no people can actually cover the major mass riots. So the only way the world knew that there was a major revolution going on was on social media. People were taking to Twitter. People were taking to Facebook. People were getting beaten. And the country, the leaders were saying, oh, nothing like that's happening, until videos started showing up on YouTube, on Twitter, and things like that. These are all examples of citizen journalists who are just doing everyday things, just documenting it and just kind of bringing these issues to light. Now, something also, as I said, you can take a camera, and in DC, obviously, these congressmen and women are a lot more accessible. But Democratic Congressman Etheridge of North Carolina just a few years ago, there was 2 students, I believe they were high school students, who saw him coming down the street. They hit record on their video camera, and they just wanted to ask him a question. He got really in their face. He actually grabbed one of them by the neck, or by the back of the neck, and would not let them go, even despite the fact you can hear on the video the kid is pleading for the man to let him go. I don't know if it's going to work.
We haven't seen it. We don't even use.
You can see this kid is not aggressive.
It's a soft battery. Nice soft face.
So, I mean, look at all that. That would have never made the news that night had 2 kids with a camera just not gone out and did that.
That would have been better.
Now he also, coincidentally due to this video, lost his next election. No surprise there. So there is a lot of power among capturing these events, and it's just regular citizens, or in this case, 2 kids doing a class project. Now we also have many examples of our own, and I want to show you, highlight some that our citizens do that really make an impact on just their local areas, but also can, as we've seen now with some drudge hits, definitely go national. In the last election cycle for president, so last year, the story goes, in Florida, there was a math professor at a Florida community college who started handing out information about Obama and like pro-Obama information and where people can go to sign up and basically vote, register for voting for our president. The writer found out and posted a news story on watchdogwire.com. The story was picked up by the Drudge Report. The professor was then placed on suspension and then relieved of her teaching duties. The examples like this are happening all the time. But if no one's there to actually record them or report on them, and mainstream media would not know. This story got picked up by quite a few different newscasts and things like that. In Michigan, which I have a couple examples of Michigan's reporting here, we had a writer who was really passionate, heard about this abortion doctor who had been in the news some, but she really wanted to go more into detail. This is an example of what the rest of the story is that the mainstream media isn't reporting or can't simply get to. The investigative writer, she looked into this abortion doctor through the FOIA process, which is Freedom of Information Act request. She found out that the doctor was still on the state's dole, so he's still collecting money from taxpayers despite being pushed out, having his practice closed, among other things. She found out that he has been involved in 51 counts of indictment, court indictments, And also, he has been charged with unlawful prescriptions, doling out unlawful prescriptions to clients. The result, the Michigan Senate, I believe just as of this last week, passed a law protecting citizens against bad doctors, and they cited this man, James Alexander. So the work that she helped bring to light actually got into legislation just this past week. Is this going to be picked up in the House? Your
Yeah.
Michigan House?
So I'm from Michigan, so I'm well familiar with the story, et cetera. And I actually went down and photographed the building. I don't know if you want to show us the story while I'm here.
Sure.
And so she just did investigative work. She's a mom. Her youngest just went off to the Navy, so she's an empty nester. And so she just followed the story, and with some guidelines from us about, some tips and techniques and how to frame it. Look at the photograph. However you feel about the abortion issue, safe, rare, and legal is that position. Well, these issues she found out are neither safe nor.
And there were some firemen who came in to the building. I think a fire alarm went off, and firemen came into the building, and then they documented what they really noticed in there. I mean, they saw that the working conditions were just atrocious. There was dried blood on the floor, which you can semi-see along there, but you can hear, this is all the testimonials of the firemen themselves, of what they kind of saw. Unsecured medications located throughout. I mean, this would have never come to light, had our citizen and things like that, and people like that really dug more into it and really reported on it. And she has since then, what's really cool, stayed with this story, and she's actually turned it into a news series, and has continuously reported on this man. She found out that he was, after this event, he actually took another job in the government as some other position, and she continues to follow him and bring the story to light and kind of, chase after him in a way. James O'Keefe, which we're giving a book away a little later. I mean, she's kind of doing along the lines of what he does, and just continuously follows, and I think she has some plans to maybe go undercover eventually, if it gets to that point.
But yeah, the Michigan Senate passed a law to make sure these types of doctors do not slip through the cracks, and it's going before the House, and then the governor will say we'll sign it.
Also in Michigan, as Chris alluded to a little earlier, we had a lady who just attended a Republican speaking event, just a regular event. The writer recorded a Republican state senator who was known for his vote for expanding Medicaid in the state of Michigan, and a lot of people were unhappy with that. So someone challenged him and asked him a question, and she recorded the senator saying, "Screw you," to one of his constituents. Now that's all on videotape, and it made its way onto radio shows. The Huffington Post picked up our story, and other media sites around the state, which I believe I can also hopefully bring up the video for you. There we go. I think it's going to be pretty quiet, unfortunately. So he's just, this guy's just asking his congressman about, just about his vote on the Medicaid expansion, violating the Hastert rule.
Try the volume on the left-hand corner in my left. Try the volume on the left-hand side of the player. There you go, turn that halfway down. Crank up the volume.
They just put the microphone right next to the speaker.
Screw you as far as we Republicans do.
What?
I said screw you as far as calling me a weak Republican.
you go. You know, the regular media, the mainstream media would have never gotten that. That was obviously, that's even a Republican event. So, and that's the beauty of what we do is, I mean, we hold everybody accountable. And that was just a concerned citizen who happened to catch that moment on tape. So that's why you always have to treat the mic like it's hot and always act like there's somebody recording you, and you won't have stuff like that. Another example is just recently from this very last election cycle. In Colorado, there's something called Amendment 66, which was meant to give schools more funding by raising taxes. We had a citizen who went to another meeting kind of like that, who actually, the governor of the state was speaking at the meeting. He just pulled out just some type of recording device. I don't know if it was his phone or just a voice recorder of some sort. The citizen recorded the governor admitting the money can be used for other things like pensions, which is a huge problem in Colorado, and a lot of people were very angry. And the biggest thing about this is a lot of elected officials, when they were trying to push Amendment 66, were pushing it on the basis of, no, this is going just for the schools, not for anything else. But then the governor comes out and admits that, no, it actually, we can't hold them accountable for the spending, for the money. It could actually go to anything like that. Other state media picked up the story, and we can't obviously take credit for it, but the amendment went down 2-to-1 margin, so it completely failed. And because of this citizen's work and just having to be there recording an authority like the governor of the state saying this, I mean, that kind of went out to all the other media, and eventually the vote failed. Now, as I said earlier, we accept all different types of stories. We want stories that can make a local difference, whether that be school board, local government, municipality meetings, whatever it is, or it could be a major story like an issue like abortion, an abortion doctor, or if there's an election cycle, different amendments like Amendment 66, whatever it may be. It might even be just following a political race itself. In Michigan, we had a county meeting on millage taxes that just came out. I don't have fortunately our links aren't working, but there's other examples, a protest over the use of red light cameras. Now, obviously, different areas have different subjects like this that are really big to you. I'm not from around here, so I don't know. I'm sure there's some major pressing issues that you guys are facing that would just be fantastic to cover. As I said, we have tons of tip sheets and resource guides. We got you covered. A lot of big things. FOIA is a very big thing. I mean, with citizens, as I said, you don't have the formal training of a journalist, but to be honest with you, you don't necessarily need that. And I'm speaking as a journalist, as a trained journalist, telling you do not necessarily need to go through all the hoops that I had to in order to just go out there, hit record on your cell phone, and let it go. Now, something that we like to do is because we understand, citizens, everybody has a life. Depending on, how many stories you produce and everything like that, we want to recognize the good work and the hard work that our citizens do. And one way we do that is through the Citizen Spotlight. We like to pick out a contributor who we feel has put together a lot of really good work for us, and we've done a really good job. It's our way of saying thanks and highlighting great journalism. I'll just show you a quick example of just kind of what we like to do here. This is Trevor Colstock. A cool little story about him. Obviously, we hear quite a bit about Snowden being a whistleblower. Here's a whistleblower who has done everything right. He is a librarian in Florida. He noticed that there were some irregularities with some training and teachers. And also, he heard from some students and then told some other teachers who then told him that there was school cheating on test exams going on. He reported all of this to the authorities, to the right people, to the auditors and things like that, who completely validated all of his claims. It found out that in Miami-Dade School District, which is the 4th largest school district in the country, had actually had teachers giving students all the questions to the exam so that they prop up their grades, which then coincidentally the school gets more money, more funding from the federal government and also from the state government. Here's a guy who reported it and then got blackballed by his union. He's also a union steward, by the way, so it's not like just a regular guy. No, he's a union steward. The union said, nah, we're not going to touch this. He actually had to be removed from the school due to threats placed against him by apparently students, even though he's completely, he wants to be there. He played by all the rules. He's a whistleblower and a perfect example, and he simply documented this for us. He brought us along the path, and so we'd like to just highlight a lot of the good work that our citizens do.
That's a question.
Sure.
Do you have any whistleblower protections or rules for that?
It's what's amazing is he's also involved now with a lawsuit because he feels that and to be honest with you, Florida state law by statute says that if you notice something like this going on, you actually have to do this. So he actually played by all the rules. He actually went by the state law, and then he was still removed from his position. So he's actually involved in a lawsuit saying, no, it's not me who has been removed, should be removed. By the way, no teachers in that have lost their jobs at all. Just to give you some perspective on that. On the whistleblower being removed, but the people who are actually cheating, they haven't faced any penalty. But whistleblowing, to be honest with you, it's different by every state. You really have to look into that. I'm not a legal authority. I'm simply a journalist. Right. And that's what we're working with him as well, because we provide the media. We unfortunately can't get too much into the legal water and stuff like that. So, but that actually brings me to the questions section. So well done.
I wanted to just make a statement, that is that, what the Franklin Center is doing is great for this country, and by helping them get this content on their site, you're helping them to surface their website on different topics in Google and other search engines. So if you need more motivation to do what Adam's talking about here, contributing articles and content to their site is going to help them to do better for people, because Google's a new Yellow Pages. So if it doesn't exist in Google, it doesn't exist at all. So the more you're able to help them do this, from a marketing standpoint for the Franklin Institute, this is a great opportunity to help them out, and I suggest everyone do it.
Oh, let's go all the way in the back first.
If you could stand up, just so other people can hear.
Sure.
And introduce yourself. I'd like to hear.
Oh, boy.
Just the name is fine.
Hello, I'm Lisa, and my question, and I might have missed it because I came a little
Sure.
late, so forgive me for that. But a lot of meetings or speakers that come, that there presents an opportunity to be a citizen journalist,
Yep.
requires you to be a member of the press. If it's something that's put on, say, by a school or somewhere else that's really not quite accessible to the general public. If you are a citizen watchdog or citizen journalist, how do you deal with that issue of whether you are a member of the press, so to speak?
We've had a couple citizen journalists who have actually gone into courtrooms and who have, looking to cover a story. I was actually at the Hassan trial with the Fort Hood shooter down in Texas. And he was actually questioned by some other mainstream media journalists. But the thing is, if it's a public meeting, as we did discuss this, it's different by every state. So again, look into that a little bit more. I'm not sure what your rules are around here, but if it's a public meeting, it's fair game. If you're there just as an audience member, you can easily just document what you hear. It's always nice to bring a notepad with and just take some notes. Write down a quote. What did they just say? You can use that, and then before or after an event, if there's a speaker, try to see kind of where the crowd is going, and if they're going to actually meet with people, go up and just talk to them afterwards. In the 2008 election cycle, when Barack Obama met Joe the plumber, Barack Obama was just talking to people after a big event, and Joe Plummer just went up to him, and someone coincidentally happened to be recording that, and the rest is kind of history on different comments. So it's just things like that. Just kind of find out your rules, because I don't want to give you the wrong information and get you in trouble. But if it's an open event to the public and things like that, I don't see too many problems with just, you know.
Well, if I might just follow up,
Sure.
I understand that part, but for instance, we're in a area there are quite a number of universities and institutes of higher learning.
Yep.
And a lot of people come there, and I happen to live near Tufts. And there was a speaker there not long ago, and there was a huge protest by Occupy Boston types that came and protested the speaker. And the only way that I got in was as a member of the press, that I kind of stretched things a little bit. And I was able to sit in there as a member of the press. Nobody asked me who I was with,
Sure.
which was good, but...
Which if you
So-
sign up with us, you can say you're with Watchdog.
Right, exactly. So I'm wondering if, this might be a ticket to get into some of these events. And
You know,
access to-
even in DC, to be honest with you, when you're dealing with media outlets and things like that who aren't more well-known, like sometimes I'll say I'm with so-and-so, or, I've had this in the past where I'm with this organization, and then they're like, well, I don't know who that is, and then you kind of have to explain to them or show them something, a business card or something along those lines. Yeah, some of those events you also have to get pre-approval from. You have to register ahead of time with your press credentials and things like that. But I mean, that's just a phone call, or just look up, do a little bit of research before the event itself on the website or something like that, and find out. Maybe there's always a media contact person. It wouldn't hurt to just contact them and get a good sense ahead of time of, is this, what's the press situation like? I'd like to cover this, for this media outlet. What are the ways of going about that? The more you do beforehand, in my experience, the better. Instead of just showing up and then sometimes they're like, sorry, we only had a limited number of press credentials and seating. There's not a lot I can do.
Okay, that's good.
Yep.
Thank you.
So we'll go here.
This is Aliana from Richthofen. Maybe a few people recognize my name. I actually came to know of Citizen or of the Watchdog.org because I personally chased down rampant corruption at the highest court of Massachusetts, the Supreme Judicial Court, and I tried to get the Attorney General to investigate. I had stacks of documentation that the clerks actually changed, altered documents, and that there was a significant fraud there, and had it confirmed by lawyers who, though, didn't want to be named because they were working within the system. So we have a situation where connected lawyers don't want any change because they've got a good situation going, and lawyers that may not be that well connected, having are afraid of repercussions through their coming out. And I found with difficulty getting public notice or media notice for this really important matter that affects all citizens in Massachusetts. I finally had one of our senators, Scott Brown, write a complaint to the U.S. Justice Department. You'll notice Scott Brown is no longer in the state of Massachusetts. I don't know what happened. He was very communicative through his legal counsel in Washington. We discussed the matter, we filed a complaint, it's being investigated. I hope, I haven't heard, nor did I ever hear back from Scott Brown. So there are things going on that are really difficult to get out, and we need, it will be helpful to get some kind of collaboration. I feel, I had a Watchdog.org writer write a posting on the matter, and he has become uncommunicative. So things are going on. I don't know what it is. People are being intimidated. Anybody in Massachusetts?
Just on that article, 2 days ago, I saw that somebody posted it on Facebook, and I was ready to go run with it, and it's disappeared. It was about Scott Brown coming out and literally talking about exactly what you're talking about, and it's disappeared. And
From your Facebook site.
No,
Oh.
somebody posted it on their Facebook. It was an article, and I could have sworn it was from Mass Live. Then I started telling people about the article, and then I went to get it for them, and I can't find it anywhere. And it's exactly your story that you're talking
Well, I
about.
just want to put it out that he was the only politician of integrity enough to look at this, to have it investigated, not to run with it, have his legal counsel look at it, and actually file a complaint. We've got the Attorney General here now running for office, the governor's seat. She wrote me a personally offensive letter when I offered to give the documentation of the corruption in the courts. I have that letter. I want to make it available. Also, the letter I wrote in response to it, where I insisted that she add my letter to the file. She told me she will no longer, she won't look into this, and she will not answer any further letter to or complaint to that effect. This is absolutely horrifying. I chose this country as my home because of the values and because what this country stands for. And I'm appalled. I didn't know where to go. I'm so glad this organization exists. And I really think we need to clean up Massachusetts because the courts. Your highest justices, 7 highest justices of the courts not responded to significant documentation that something is very, very wrong there. That requires citizens to take action if nobody else will. Okay, thank you.
So we can just,
I just
one
said
more
that-
question.
Can I just say one more thing? It says that this is a question of mine, right on the Supreme. I wanted to go protest there with a sign. It says you may not demonstrate in front of the Supreme Judicial Court. Police take notice. What does that mean? Am I going to go to jail if I'm going to stand there with a sign? Why?
So that
That's
you'll
the
have
first
to
thing.
look into the local things, but we want to give someone else, but come see
Yes.
us after and we'll see what
I want to know.
else we
I
can do.
want to go there. Give my
One more
son.
question? Yeah, quickly.
The Attorney General is a good lady, and she really has done a great job as Attorney General and as a District Attorney of Middlesex County. And we want her as governor.
Okay, I'm going to stand up now. Our Attorney General will not do anything to protect us, to help us. I don't know how you could make that statement.
We're not gonna, we don't want to get into
But I do, I
Sorry, sir.
In relation to what this woman said, I wanted to bring to the attention.
Just real quick, Christine, we gotta
Okay.
move on.
This situation that she's talking about is hugely destructive and frightening in Massachusetts. I live it, I fight it every day. If Citizen Watchdog could help us collaborate, unite, the intimidation, the threats, the everything is, I mean, I've gone to jail, I'm persecuted, but if Citizen Watchdog could help all of us.
So
with
we
this
can,
support.
if there's stories, we will print them.
Right.
They have to be factual, we can't, bomb
But
throwing
it's
is.
about
So,
protection and
but
retaliation.
we can't help you in
Okay.
your community. It's the same as if you turned in a news tip or something. So we don't want to, we have to move on, we have a different panel, but Adam and I will both
I
be
will
here, so
gladly
we'll ask.
answer all
We're gonna ask
questions.
in
We'll be
between.
here all day. So, we got plenty of time. Okay, I just wanted, now that there's more people here, just take care of a couple of quick housekeeping things. The restrooms are in the room behind us. It is co-ed. If you need Wi-Fi, the passcode is right here. You also have a pamphlet with bios of all the speakers that are here today. I encourage you when you get home to connect with them on Facebook and Twitter. Their Twitter accounts have been put on there if they have a Twitter account. And that would be a really good way that we can all keep in touch after this is over today. Try to keep the talking to a minimum in this room. I know it's very difficult, but if you really need to talk or if you need to hook up with a speaker after you're done, try and do it in one of the adjoining rooms. And
In the hashtag, which we didn't write.
oh, that's right. We have a hashtag for Twitter. If any of you are on Twitter, it's BostonWD for Boston Watchdog. So if you're tweeting about this event, use that hashtag. We are selling t-shirts from our Tax Day rally with Obama's favorite quote on it that we love. The quote is, "To take out a credit card in the name of our children is irresponsible and unpatriotic." We love that quote. The t-shirts are $10 and it includes a Breitbart book while they last. And for any donation today, you can win a chance to win one of the Tea Party board games over there, or we have other books available as well. So we'll be drawing a little bit later today. So I want to introduce our next panel. It's a legislative / public policy panel. We have Paul Craney from Mass Fiscal Alliance, and we have Representative Mark Lombardo and Representative Matt Beaton that are going to come up and talk. They're going to spend a few minutes just introducing themselves, and then they're going to talk primarily about the success of repealing the tech tax. Maybe you heard about that. That was a very big win for conservatives in the state. So they'll talk about how that came about, and also they'll talk about some of the legislative issues going on in the Hill right now. Gentlemen, come on up.
Don't worry about it.
Oh, we did this, and then you go. Yeah, and you had.
Computer and projector. Anybody have?
Sure. How about you not go first? Or do you need to?
Okay.
That's a good idea.
I think just start,
Okay.
and whenever you get that.
So we're going to pass out some blue. Do you have a PowerPoint or you just need to show?
No, just website.
To open up the, I just closed the.
I got all this.
This is for
It's okay.
There's 43 employees over 20. Only 3 make sense.
Don't get bogged down. It's fine. No. Comical.
I spent about 30 minutes rolling that Facebook page. There's nothing favorable there.
I don't know.
All right, I think we're ready. Hello, my name is Paul Craney, and I work for a group called Massachusetts Fiscal Alliance. It is a, for lack of better words, it is a conservative, economic, fiscal, and government nonprofit group in Massachusetts. We're one of those 501c4s you hear about in the news sometimes, which essentially means we have the freedom to lobby the legislature, educate the public, and empower the grassroots. So I just wanted to make sure everyone kind of sees one of these. Hopefully they're being passed around. This is a new initiative that we recently launched. It's a legislative scorecard. What that means is that other groups around the state, like CLP and FIB, they put out a scorecard once every 2 years or so. And we have an online, real-time legislative scorecard that anyone here can go on, log in, and look up their legislators. So we're blessed today to have 2 lawmakers with us. And we're going to kind of test this out and see how they fare on our scorecard. So, if you wouldn't mind, and this is like, if you were curious, you can put in your zip code and find your lawmaker. But if you wouldn't mind, let's put in Matt Beaton. Matt Beaton, why don't you just raise your hand real quick? So let's see what he gets, our legislative scorecard. So here you go, he gets 100%. I don't know if you guys can see that. When you click on Matt, there he is in a nice suit. You get to see he's at 100, and the House of Representatives in Massachusetts is at 25%. So the average is 25 with our views that they score, and Matt's at 100%, which is amazing. If you scroll down, so this is for people here to look at. When you scroll down on Matt's profile, you get to see how he votes on these issues that we care about, and our stance, Mass Fiscal Alliance's stance. So one of the reasons why we launched this website is because it's really hard for anyone in this room to go to the legislative website and find lawmakers and how they vote. So say if you own an industry, say Brad White here owns this building, and there's a piece of legislation that says all buildings that are on Grafton Street that's over 5 stories is going to have a new tax. Well, Brad would say, oh crap, I need to go find this piece of legislation, I need to go find the hearings. You'd probably have to hire a high-powered attorney just to track it. And that's not acceptable. So if you look at this website, this will give you how people actually vote. So just scroll down if you wouldn't mind. And this isn't really right-wing stuff. This is pretty moderate, actually, in Massachusetts. If you just go up a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. We score votes on fiscal issues, so economic issues and transparency. How about 24 hours to review bills before they vote on it? That's not really right wing. That's kind of common sense. Let's have so these guys can actually read something before they vote. It's not their fault. They're thrown in the legislature. They have to vote on bills before they can read it. So this is something that we said we believe in it. These guys should be able to read what they want to vote on beforehand. The legislature is 29, if you see on the right, 29 voted yes in favor of this. That's our position. 125 lawmakers said no, they don't believe in that. They rather just go there and be told what to vote on. And so when you scroll down, you get to see every lawmaker and how they voted and their average score and the little elephant and donkey for the party representation. So this is not us scoring people on what they say, the campaign trail, who they endorsed, or what bills they proposed. This is strictly scoring them on how they vote as a lawmaker. So it's not really biased. I mean, we have our position, but this is how they actually do vote. So why don't you scroll back up and just hit the Mass Fiscal Scorecard or whatever. Just get back to the home page. Not right back. Home page. There you go. Let's look up Lombardo. Oh, you went to my, okay, it's over. That's our main web page. Yeah, you can just hit search. That will get that.
Loading.
All right, Mark's at 100% too. I just want to kind of point something out to you guys. So Mark and Matt are great lawmakers. They agree with us literally 100% of the time on how they vote, which is phenomenal. Let's go ahead and, Matt, what's your zip code in Shrewsbury? Just go to zip.
01545.
Can you put that in there? So this is a great example. This is Worcester County, Shrewsbury, a nice suburb of Worcester. And this is a good example of what's wrong with Massachusetts. We have Matt beating 100%, and his state senator below, Michael Moore, at 33%. And why
Because of the name.
Why that's significant for this audience is because in Massachusetts you have a lot of lawmakers who say they're conservative on economic issues. In reality, when we actually score their votes, we do all the hard work to figure it all out. They don't really fare that well. So even though Michael Moore is maybe a little bit higher than the Senate average, if you start scrolling down, you'll see he voted the wrong way for obviously, almost 70% of the time against us. So let's see, put photo ID on EBD cards. We said yes, he voted no. I mean, that's not really conservative when you're voting against that kind of stuff. And again, in the state Senate, there were 8 there that voted for that. He wasn't one of them. So there's 4 Republicans at a time, 4 Democrats supported. He wasn't one of the Democrats. So this is a little pamphlet here, and this is kind of a teaser to our website. It shows every lawmaker and their score. It's kind of a great way for you to just figure out when you hear a lawmaker talk, to kind of figure out how they actually score, kind of just get right to the point of, are they actually conservative? I will tell you this, we don't score on issues like guns, we don't score on issues like the social stuff out there. We just stick to kind of the taxes and spending, the budget process, and some transparency issues. So I just wanted to kind of bring this to light to you guys, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Let's go through each person and take questions all at once, so that, is that okay?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's fine. That's great by me.
Hi everyone. My name is Mark Lombardo. I'm a state rep from the town of Billerica. It's the 22nd Middlesex District, and it is just the town of Billerica. Prior to being in the legislature, I'm in my second term, third year, I was on the Board of Selectmen in Billerica for 6 years. I served a term as a year as chairman, a couple years as vice chairman. Was the youngest elected selectman in the town of Billerica's history, which was quite surprising since the town's been around since 1655. So that was a nice little honor to have. And I tell you that because I think it points out what fiscal conservatives, Republicans need to do to try to take back the state legislature. And that's build a strong farm team, get them involved in local government, and then grow and bring them up to the state level. And so that's my story. And I'm also very honored to have my colleague Matt Beaton here with us today. That's it. That's all I got.
All right. I am Matt Beaton. I am the state representative for the 11th Worcester District, which is Shrewsbury and 2 precincts in Westboro. I didn't have much of a background in local government like Mark. I was a town meeting member, and I was really active in my community, but I didn't really run for office. And what really motivated me, and I think when you get up into the State House and you meet a lot of our colleagues, a lot of different walks of life. And there's a lot of us doing a lot of different things. And the thing that ultimately motivated me was trying to start and run my own business in Massachusetts. And being a owner of some rental property at an early age. And seeing some of the abuses of a lot of the programs and systems that we had by people. And also being inside an industry that got completely overtaken and changed by a new government program, state-run, statewide program, that completely changed the landscape of an industry that existed for many years. And it was very frustrating, and ultimately what was the spark for me to want to get involved, to fight for things like all the things that the guys over at the Fiscal Call and everyone over at the Mass Fiscal Alliance bring light to. And that is an incredible tool, and I encourage you all to spread the word, to show people, because they've laid it out really easy. I mean, they couldn't have made it much more easy to find the information. They laid it out in a very simple manner. So I definitely encourage you to help spread the word on that. And one of the topics I think we were going to talk about, my background, I went to school at WPI and then over at BU. I have kind of an environmental background. I'm a Republican with an environmental background. You don't see that every day. But that's part of my company. We build sustainable buildings, and we do it in such a way. My wife and I built the first certified passive house in Massachusetts, and we've gone through the last 2 heating cycles without a heating bill. And the reason why I say that is, when we built it, because of the town we live in, we couldn't qualify, Shrewsbury couldn't qualify for a lot of the subsidies and all these other things. We built this house that does not need any heat, and we did it without a single tax credit, subsidy, or anything of the like government intervention. And we were still able to do it in such a way that had a smart return on the investment. So a lot of these programs, and this is where I channel a lot of my energy in the environmental world, all these subsidized programs and all these things you read about, and solar this and wind that and all this stuff, I've been trying to dig in to the regulatory side of all of that and try to bring light to a lot of the ways that we're doing it. You wouldn't believe the way the bureaucracy and the nonsense that's been created since we've done a lot of these programs. So these are some of the things that Mark and I are up here. Just really quickly, one of the things that Mark and I really kind of led the charge in early on, we both filed amendments to repeal that tech tax, that egregious tax. And Mark comes from that industry. And, we really got up there and with our Republican colleagues, while at the time we were only 30 out of 160, I think in our tenure, because Mark and I came in at the same time, was probably the best example of how, even though we're only 30, we can be loud and we can actually make a difference. And I think we're going to hear more about the tech tax in a minute, but that shed light on how, even though we're few, how much we can do and how much more of a benefit we would have by having more of our colleagues. So when you're out there working for candidates and trying to get candidates elected, just remember there's one magic number, 54. If we can get to 54 Republicans in the legislature and have a Republican in the corner office, the entire dynamic of what goes on in the Massachusetts legislature will completely change, because at that point we'll be able to sustain the governor's veto. These are the things we really got to be working for. Understanding that we all, we don't agree with each other 100% of the time. We don't. But when it comes time for things like the tech tax, we're ready to roll our sleeves up together, work together, and fight this nonsense that goes on up on Beacon Hill. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you all very much. And
so I'm not sure if there's a specific format to this, but we can dive into the tech tax a little bit.
That's great.
So my background outside of the State House is in software. I sell software for a cloud-based company based out of California, one of the fastest growing tech companies in the entire world. And I'm intimately familiar with the tech industry and software industry. And when I saw that this software tax was being proposed, tech tax, I mean, it was like flashing lights, like this is a problem. And I took to the floor. And prior to taking the floor, I called the Ways and Means chairman, and I asked him if he could explain how this tech tax would be applied. And I went through various areas of the software industry. There's implementation, there's configuration of software, there's consulting services, there's a whole array of areas within the industry. And the guys that supposedly wrote the bill had no idea what it did. I had no idea what it did. And they expected the legislature to pass something that they couldn't explain to us. And it was very evident to me, having been someone in the industry that had some expertise in this, that when the chairman of Ways and Means got up and the proponents of the tech tax got up and they tried to explain it, they had no idea what they're talking about. And that's why it's very important, to Matt's point, that we have people with all sorts of expertise that come into the State House from different industries. And, I'm not an expert on building and trades, and that's where, Matt would really be able to throw in some expertise. Well, this was my area of expertise. And when you know what you're talking about, and you see somebody go to the mic, they may be able to convince some others that don't know what they're talking about, that they should vote a certain way. But when you know what you're talking about, it was very clear. They didn't have a clue. And they still don't have a clue today, by the way. And what was more disturbing about that is, they wanted to pass this bill and then throw it over to the Department of Revenue to decide, all right, we give you a framework, now go figure out how to make it work. Now you're talking about a dangerous way to put in legislation and let the Department of Revenue determine how much it was going to tax everybody. And it was such a mess for the Department of Revenue that they had to come out with guidelines and then other versions of guidelines and then revise those guidelines and revise them again. It was a complete mess. And one of the great things that we did during this debate, and Matt was the first one to do it, is when he got up to the microphone, he looked out in the chamber and said, we have a chamber of 160 people, of 160 representatives, and I think there's like 40 in this chamber right now. No one's here for the debate. Nobody cares. And that's the problem on Beacon Hill. Because when you go into Beacon Hill and you look up the two boards, the voting boards, the very top corner, left corner, it says speaker. And there's a red light and a green light. And you know how everyone, particularly the Democrats, know how they vote? They sit and they wait. They look up, they see how the speaker votes, and then they push their button. All right? That's how it works in Beacon Hill, folks. And that's why we need some change. All right? That's why we need change. That's why we need more balance in Beacon Hill, so that when we speak, that we can have an audience that's listening, that cares about debate, that everything isn't prearranged, and then we can have greater influence in actually changing some of these votes. The tech tax was a great example of all those terrible things in motion. But it also brought up another great thing, another example of how we can make a difference, as Matt pointed out. The tech industry got so upset and so involved immediately after and told the Democratic leaders of the state that we're going to move our business. You are destroying our industry. We're a technology company. We don't have to have an office in Massachusetts. We'll go to New Hampshire. We'll go to Connecticut. We'll go to New York. We'll go to Florida. We don't need to be here. And for once, the Democrats were so alarmed at the outcry and the involvement of the tech industry, they backtracked. And it was a great example of how when people get involved and they really push and really work, they can stop bad legislation. It would have been great if we had stopped it before it passed. After the fact, repeal, that's pretty good too. So Matt was really instrumental in that. I'd like to think I played a part in that. This was something I knew about. It just outlines all the reasons why I'm in town.
And to that point, I don't care what party you're in, Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever. Our government is not designed to be, 81%, 80 or like 85% on the House side. One party have that same party have the corner office, and 90-10 in the Senate or whatever the numbers are. We are completely out of balance, and what that does is it stifles the debate. It like Mark said, when we got up to take the floor to raise taxes, $500 million. There were 45 people in the room out of 160.
30 Republicans, by the way.
30 of them were Republicans. Every single Republican was in the room. Yes, sir. You look like. Say something.
The casinos, it looks like that people in Massachusetts do not want the casinos. And do you think that was too many casinos? You know, you had 3 casinos plus 2 for the one for the racetrack and 1 down for the dogs or for down.
Well, that's how it was designed. It's not looking like it's going to play out that way anymore.
No, they don't want it.
Right.
And don't you think if they don't want the casino, would you prefer to have off-track betting?
Sorry.
Well, I think what we're going to find out is if there's a ballot initiative, whether the people want casinos or not. The way it was designed is that there'd be 3 regions, 3 casinos. From a personal perspective, yeah, I think that's probably a bit much for a state as small as Massachusetts. The kicker on that is their 4th is possible because of the Native American ability to open up a casino. And then now we're seeing something down on, I think it was Nantucket, where another tribal casino could open up. That's a lot.
Well, I don't think we should put it down on the island.
Well, unfortunately, with the tribal rules and regulations and federal guidelines, we have little control, and I think that the administration is dealing with that issue right now. But I think the monkey wrench that was thrown into this is people were expecting that it would be welcomed in to places like Suffolk Down and whatnot, and when it was not, it really added an interesting dynamic. I think one of the good things that were put in the legislation, and we're seeing it play out now, is communities get to vote whether they want this casino or not. And ultimately, if the communities continue to vote no, you'll never see casinos pop up. And I think that was a good piece of legislation to let the community decide what they want.
Well, Suffolk Downs would like Hard Rock Casino of United Kingdom.
Yep.
That is clean and so forth. That would go in there if they want to just put 1 in.
That will be something that will be decided by the Gaming Commission. That's something outside of our hands at this point.
There's 2 questions in that one. The thing I think that helped you the second time around was that video of one of you guys speaking on the House floor about the tech tax. Because it went every place. And when they saw that you guys were fighting it back in March or April, all right, that put a lot of pressure. But to get back to what you said, when the bill went through, all right, when the bill went through, how much input do these administrators have in these committee offices to write these bills over the legislators?
Well, you're saying how much control do
how much do they control it? Because that guy didn't know what he wrote, but somebody in that office is the one that wrote it.
Well,
so they're putting their name on something that a civil servant or a political appointment is putting in.
Well, it's a problem on Beacon Hill, right? So a lot of the time the
And
leadership.
nobody's addressing it.
Right. Leadership, particularly the majority party, has these huge staffs, and they hire all the experts, and whether it be in healthcare or life sciences or any industry, and they have their staff, and they depend heavily on their staff. And you bring out a great point that here some of the political leaders are rolling forward with legislation that they didn't even understand, right? You'd be hard pressed to get anyone to admit that, but that was the reality of it. They didn't truly know what the legislation that they were doing. And again, it goes back to Matt's point. When you have a legislature that is 85% one party in the House and 90% in another in the Senate, and every single constitutional office is one party, but the reality is 3 people decide everything that goes on: the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, and the Governor, and they follow suit.
I think they should start looking at these administrators.
But to your point, specifically on the tech tax, as part of the vehicle in the transportation finance bill, the governor originally had it in his budget. We created, and when I say we as a body, the House, created a new vehicle in the transportation finance bill. So this bill was supposedly supposed to go towards transportation. What the tech sector has to do with transportation, I still don't understand. But if you read the bill, it's like section 48 and 49 of the transportation finance bill, that had to do with the tech tax. It was literally 5 sentences long, if that. It was the most vague. It talked about integration, software development, all these terms. It was so vaguely worded. Guys like Mark and I looked at this and literally laughed, because the whole pitch coming out of Ways and Means was that this was going to be $160 million in new revenue for the Commonwealth, and our immediate reaction was, we have no idea what industry is and what actual specific things these industries are doing is actually going to be taxed with this tax. We're going to leave that up to DOR to promulgate regulations to figure out. We're going to have non-elected bureaucrats figure out what companies are going to be taxed. And despite us not having any clue what that would end up looking like, we were still somehow able to come up with a $160 million number. So to us, that was one of the most egregious parts of this taxes. We're going to say this is going to generate $160 million, but we actually don't have any idea who's going to be affected by it yet, or how many companies are actually going to be felt by it. So these are the things we're up against up there.
And let me just piggyback on what Matt and Mark are saying. As an observer of what they do in the State House, they were able to apply a lot of pressure to the body, which was wonderful. They will experience very few days in their professional career where they get to go to the State House and repeal a tax. So that was something that was probably the first thing they were done, and hopefully not the last time, but it was very significant for them to go in that building and vote to repeal taxes in Massachusetts. But to follow on that point, the reason why they got to this point where they proposed this tax that passed and affected a lot of people is because there wasn't one public hearing on this tax bill. So you have a government making a new tax on a huge industry in Massachusetts without asking one person in the state, what do you feel about it? And that is really problematic. So despite the argument of saying, you voted for this tax increase and then you voted to repeal it, why did you do that? I don't really want to focus the people to go that direction. I want to say the system that got us here is broken, it still is broken. When you can pass major tax bills without a single public hearing, and that has not been fixed since that happened, that's a problem. So despite this tax repeal being put into effect and this software tax is gone, there's nothing to prevent the House and the Senate from doing this again. And that really needs to get changed. So these guys deserve a lot of credit for being there, applying the pressure for months and months and months, and be able to go in their careers to repeal the tax. But there needs to be more done as far as making sure that when we have new taxes coming up, there has to be hearings on it, there must be studies to see how it's going to affect Massachusetts.
Yeah, Miss?
Okay, I'm Janet Aldrich, and Catch of the Day Video News, and I have an independent press organization in Massachusetts that I'm creating. And one of the discovery items that I did and hammered this thing to death, okay, is that the State House, the reason that they can get away and they can push that envelope as far as they want is they are not under the public record law. Okay, so do we get it yet? I mean, having bills pass that we have to pass before we understand what's in it, the Pelosi word of the year, okay, has got to stop. So it's going to stop if we will put pressure, put a petition in signatures for the gas tax. For a day, I volunteered because I wanted to get the public sentiment. The public sentiment is what rules and moves the nation. Do you know how upset people are about the gas tax? They are livid. They are so, you know, there is such a pressure building that media needs to capitalize on, and they need to get that sentiment out, because, I mean, that's really, it's all about public record law on the State House, on this, at the State House. And I had Galvin's office tell me the last time I was really there fighting with them, they don't have to hold a meeting, they don't have to announce a meeting, and they don't have to have a hearing. And so in other words, they can do whatever they want. And this is a perfect example of how you caught them in that dirty deed, and they have every legal right to do it because they took themselves out from under public record law in the 80s, and we need to stick them back under it and then slap term limits on them, and that's the end of the story.
So to take that one step further, one of the things that with open meeting law that the legislature is exempt from is that means that when the Democrats hold the caucus, and as we pointed out, they own 85% of the House, they have far more than the majority of the members. So they go into caucus before we come into a session. They're told how they're going to vote. They come in the session, and everything's predetermined. So you talk about why open meeting, you know, in municipal government, the majority of any board can't meet in private. It would be a violation of open meeting. That's not the way it works in the legislature. And I filed legislation to repeal that, to make the legislature remove that exemption. You can guess where that bill ended up. But you're right. It comes down to public pressure. And every once in a while, like we're doing with this gas tax, and Jeff Deal and Sean O'Connell doing an amazing job leading the charge and getting signatures on that. You got to put it on the ballot. And that might be one of those things that has to happen as well. One in the background, I think.
Yeah, to the gentleman's point in the corner, I fully agree with that. I mean, you know, that's one way of getting better accountability in the process. Another way I was thinking of was, I mean, first of all, this particular, like you said, the 5 sentences. You know, you had to go basically look at the DOR stuff to get all the details once they actually came up with what they're going to do and figure out how they're going to tax. But I don't know if the amendment actually made it through any specific committee. But I mean, you know, who in the committee that might have passed it through to the floor, or who in the floor itself actually is from IT and was able to sort of show that this is not a very good idea? Like, how many people are there that are from IT? Because I'm from IT, and I look at it.
I think there's one.
Mark,
one of the
yeah, I know, but like, how many of your colleagues are from IT?
Very few.
And none that we know of.
And this was one of the things that struck me with that is I'm not an IT. I was still able to read that and realize how ridiculous it was. Just having a basic understanding
DOR stuff is even more ridiculous.
That's what makes it even more ridiculous. I didn't need a huge technology background to actually understand it because they were using common everyday words that were, it really wasn't, that was the problem with it. We didn't define it specifically enough. If there were words in there that I didn't recognize, I would have felt more comfortable. At least it had a good focus. But it was so vaguely and poorly worded that it was an obvious signal that there was no engagement with the technology community in the development of it. They said they met with industry groups. They didn't meet with a single IT company, software company. They met with a major trade group.
What committee it came from? Did it come from a committee?
Ways and Means. Everything comes from Ways and Means.
Oh, so I mean, there's no IT committee that said, maybe we can push the tax.
No.
And there's no hearings.
You mean specialists actually writing appropriate legislation?
Well, understanding what
that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it seems like it would make sense to have an IT,
That's why it wasn't done. Common sense is not so common when being held like that.
Well, to their point, open meeting and voting and looking at how the speaker votes and things like that. Mark and Matt, I think it was one of your amendment together, to just strip it from the bill. Clearly just strip it. There's a few representatives, one of them's Danielle Gregoire, who lives in the highest tech belt, which is the 495 belt up near Marlboro, Westboro. She's got that in her district. She said that she voted against every tax, but if you go to the roll calls, which I'll show you how to get to later today, even a little bit more in depth than what he has, she voted against removing the tech tax. And then when she was called on it by myself and some other people that called her on it to the newspaper, she said, "Oh, that's just parliamentary minutia. No, you voted against removing and stripping a tax bill." And the way that this thing got repealed, and I may show the slide when I get up, is that the people you don't want to tick off in 2013 are the people who control all the computers, because they pretty much control the world. And these guys put up this really simple, open source, how to contact your legislator, and they just bombarded them, and bombarded them, and bombarded them, and the phone calls didn't stop, and everybody in the tech community knew about it. So they say that it takes 5 or 10 calls to get your legislator to change something. These people were getting hundreds, and hundreds, and hundreds. And the people that were the last holdouts, if you look at the map, Jamie Eldridge was the last holdout in the Senate, who ended up going against it. His is the darkest green. He got the most calls because he was the last one, and they just kept hammering and hammering and hammering and hammering. And it's really, it's citizen activism and citizen journalism and openness. They've got to that point, so it's very relevant to what we're doing. But these guys, you know, basically the only way that we can get anything done through the amendment process in Massachusetts is you file an amendment to try and change the law, because there's no opportunity to try and change the law anywhere else in the process, because they don't have open meetings. They don't. It's not like Congress where there's committee meetings and they're debating amendments. They just, you know, decide what they want to write in the back of a napkin and they vote on it.
And to that one point, we were debating every year at the beginning of it, well, every 2 years at the beginning of our term, the first vote we take is on the rules debate. And that's where a lot of these changing of the House rules, a lot of these sunshine, open meeting, all these things that we're talking about, that's really the heart of when we get a chance to debate them. I'll never forget this one. I actually laughed out loud in the chamber. I actually turned around and looked at you, we were laughing at it together. They actually got up there and said the reason why we can't put a lot of this stuff out there was an amendment to put certain committee votes and some video and a lot of things online for the public to view. And the reason why they said they couldn't do it was because we did not have the IT infrastructure available to us to. That's the absurdity of it. It's clearly not true. And it's insane that that would actually be said as a reason why we can't give the public the opportunity for them in today's world in 2013, the ability to view what's going up on with how their taxpayer dollars are being spent up there. And it was all because we don't have the technology to do it in the State House. When you go in every meeting room, you go everywhere, there's cameras everywhere. You can flip a switch like that and you can do it.
Do you have a question?
Well, I'm Claire from HALT MA Smart Meters, and we have a bill, H2926. And so I lobbied the Telecommunications Committee with another member of our group, and it was clear that the only people we need to lobby are the chairs, because whenever there's, this is my first foray into this. I'm like, are you kidding? You don't think independently and look independently? No. All I need is to convince the chairs, and that's where it'll go.
It goes back to the absolute one-sided power
Right.
being held, and it just rolls up to the speaker. And the reality is, and Matt gave you that 54 number. I mean, we're not even at that ability to, if something was to get vetoed or protected. I mean, they have such a supermajority that literally a handful of people run the entire state, and that's why we need to change. And that's why 2014 has to be an incredibly successful election for Republicans in the legislature and the corner office.
Could I just make one comment to your statement? Sure. And I agree with you, and you were very perceptive in picking up on that.
I told you.
Okay. However, going back to Rob's point, one of the reasons for the overturn of the tech tax was the outside pressure of the individual. So if a committee chair or the Senate president or the speaker is hearing from every one of his members, or every one of his committee chairs, and the people he listens to, that my phone is ringing off the hook. I can't. We need to do something about this. This is going to kill me. Like my district is not happy with this. That message, if that message is coming from every member to them, that's maybe internally one way to apply some pressure. So if you're actually trying to change something specifically within something, or working with the committee chairs is definitely the right move. And there's always the first place to start. But that outside pressure, like in the tech tax, definitely can create a groundswell to overturn something.
Yeah, in the back corner.
It's okay. Hi.
Did the Democrats seem nervous about the repeal of the automatic gas tax increase? Are you hearing any buzz on Beacon Hill about that?
I think it's not something they want to see in the ballot. How's that? You know, generally speaking, when tax bills hit the ballot and they're reasonable, and I say that as a guy who is all about tax cuts. I look at when I think it was 2 years ago or 4 years ago, we put on the ballot to reduce the income tax to 3% instead of just going to 5%. And when you go too far, the public won't go with you. If it's a reasonable thing, like 5%, I think would have won that year in a heartbeat. Something like this is extremely reasonable with the gas tax. Repeal the automatic increase. I call it the gas tax to infinity and beyond. I got to the floor. I talked about how my kids love Buzz Lightyear and Toy Story, and that's what this tax reminds me of. And I think the public, that is something that is so egregious, and it's such a bad precedent that the legislature will not even vote year after year to raise your taxes. They're going to vote once, try to take the pain of it one time at the ballot box, and then let it forever increase. And the precedent's bad because what's next? They're going to do that to your income tax? Right. To your sales tax?
They did that with the minimum wage.
Right, exactly. They want to do it with minimum wage, right? So it is a terrible precedent. And I would imagine, as a Republican, I love that it's going on the ballot. So I got to think that as a Democrat, they may not be so excited about it on the ballot.
Sir, do you think the Speaker would be in agreement if the casinos all get defeated, put in off-track betting?
I don't know. It's not something that I'm an expert on, so I'm not sure that I can give you some insightful feedback on it. I apologize. I don't know.
Well, they voted in every, what, 85% of the people in Everett want the casino? So, I mean, there's a large population out there that wants to come to casinos.
But actually in Leominster, which is right up, you go 190, 290, and you go 10 miles from here, actually voted to have the slot parlor. So they're one of the few communities that have voted to have it. The casinos are going to find someone to say yes. And there's going to be casinos.
You have a question back there?
Yes, you both are just wonderful, a wonderful example of what the future is. My question is, how did you get elected? And what's the secret?
The record is a Democrat.
So first of all, I think it's safe to say we both come from good districts, right? We come from districts that have shown that they're willing to vote for Republicans. In fact, the incumbents or my predecessor who retired was a Democrat. He was there for 18 years, but he was a conservative Democrat. And I think what I showed the public, they had seen me for 6 years on the Board of Selectmen. And I think what they saw in me particularly was, one, someone who approaches government with common sense. Two, someone who's just a regular Joe with a family and a home and some kids and who had the same concerns. Wasn't some elitist politician who has never worked in the private sector, and that I could relate to them. And the issues of the day were right for me in 2010, and I think they're right in 2012, and they were in 2015, is that it's all about the pocketbook and how this economy is affecting family. And my message was on target with that, and as had been my voting record as a member of the Board of Selectmen. I'll let Matt answer that question, and then I'd like to give some insight on what we're going to do in 2014.
Yeah. I think Mark and I have a very similar, well, A, I think we have similar districts. B, I think we have a similar story to tell. We're both, if you haven't noticed, about the same age. Young families, we both have small kids. We're regular guys. That's my thing. You know, I drive a pickup truck and swing a hammer. You know, I love getting dirty. I hunt, I fish. I love my kids. I'm engaged in my community. Just a regular guy, you know, and that is, you know, I think nationally something that the Republican Party is struggling with is an identity crisis. And, you know, politicians in general, you know, especially the further up you go up the ladder, you know, there's a sense of like elitism and you know, Mark and I have not forgotten where we came from. And I think that was a really important thing to get across to people and showing them that, hey, I'm just a regular guy, I'm hardworking, I'm contributing, I'm paying my taxes, I want the government to leave me alone, give me, you know, get off my back, and just let me live my life. I also think that there is a role in government to help those who are truly, truly in need of it, and we need to figure out and find who those people really are, and not be taken advantage of by those who know how to play the system. And that's the message I think Mark and I and our colleagues that we really get out there and say, look, we're the first ones, you know, in my personal life, the volunteer work and the things that I do, that's for me, and I do that for my own self, but we get painted sometimes as the party of no, the party that wants to take things away from people. No, we're the first ones to get in line to help people and to help those who truly need it. And it's getting that message across. It's just going after the people who are abusing the system and recognizing that government does have to have a place to help those that are most in need in our society, and really hammering that message across that, you know, we're not the party of no, we're the party of yes, just yes the right way.
Let me just add to that, they are the party of no, that's K-N-O-W. But you bring up a good point. I just want to ask this question. You can say it out loud as a group. There's two parties in Massachusetts, Republican, Democrat. Which do you think is the most powerful party in Massachusetts? I would say the Republicans. They don't run candidates. They constantly don't run candidates in these elections. Therefore, it's already determined who's going to win in November. But I just want to tell you this. These guys ran, they made that personal decision a few years ago. This group needs to collectively think, what do you want to do in 2014? Let me just paint a picture. We've had 8 years, and this doesn't come around very often. It's basically every few decades. We've had 8 years of a failing liberal Democratic president, 8 years of a failing liberal Democratic governor. We all kind of knew he couldn't create jobs, the governor of Massachusetts, but now we're discovering he can't even run the welfare office right. So this group needs to think, we're going into a year, 2014, where you don't have this type of opportunity very much. We saw it during the Carter years, we saw when Reagan won, we're going to see it again in 2014. I encourage you guys, you said how these guys win. They ran. We don't run in the state with two parties. It's usually one party who decides not to run, and therefore we have one party that always wins. Yeah. So many of you live in these suburban areas where Scott Brown carried in 2010 70% of the vote. Charlie Baker carried when he lost, in the high 50s or high 60s. We really need to think, how do we get more people like these guys, these conservatives in Beacon Hill? And the first answer is run.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on what Rob had pulled up, and this is what I thought Paul was talking about as well. This map. Yeah, start with this map.
There's 160 legislative districts in the House. Scott Brown won over 80 of them.
In 2010.
In 2010, in the special election, Scott Brown won over 80 of them.
He won 98.
Won 98 of those 160. Now, I'm not great at math, but 98 divided by 160 is over 50%. And Charlie Baker won something like 75 or 76. Yeah, won 75. And then if you take Charlie Baker and Tim Cahill together, Deval Patrick lost well over 70 of them. People think Massachusetts is a one-party state because, like he said, people don't run. Our map looks like every other map in the rest of the country. Our urban areas vote Democratic, and it's even better because our urban areas vote Democratic at 90% and 85% and 70%. So the vote that lets the Democrats win statewide is very concentrated, which opens up a lot more things. So, I'm going to show you how to get this data later because it's one of the public records that you can go and get this data. But you got to change the mindset of woe is us.
Right. And so what does this mean for 2014? This is where I was going with this. This shows that we can win as Republicans. So how do you do it? The question was, how did Matt and I get elected? And I think we both laid out that we're regular guys. Would you guys say that we're extremists at all? Would anyone say we're kind of like weird, right?
If you were
and so I think that's the key. We find good candidates that aren't viewed as some extremists and crazy. We have the right message. And I look at things, one of the things that the Tea Party gets coined as is extremists and wackos. And I don't think anyone in the state is an extremist or a wacko. Sometimes it's our messaging, right? I think, well, maybe wrong. But I look at something like this. It says, don't believe the liberal media. This is a losing message for Republicans. I want you to know that.
Right.
This is, when I talk to some Republicans around the state and say, we need to impeach Obama. I say, if you keep talking like that, Republicans are going to lose. It's not the right message. The message is, how is government hurting you? How is government hurting your family? How are taxes